When you talk about handheld gaming, what's the first thing that comes to mind? PSP? DS? Game Boy? I'm assuming you read the title, so I'm just trying to have an excuse to transition into Java games. According to YouTube, most of you are between 25 and 44 years old, so I'm going to assume that you've, at least at one point in your life, used an old mobile phone with 1 or 2 J2ME games on it. However, if you are somehow a toddler who accidentally clicked on this video in between Genshin Impact sessions, this is what games used to look like before Steve Jobs happened. And yes, most of them run below 15 FPS. Some time ago I decided to set up a Java emulator because of one thing or another, and then with the power of 2004 Nokia smartphones at my fingertips, I fell into a bit of a rabbit hole. You guys are not ready for some of the stuff I'm about to show you. But before we get started, we need to set some ground rules. Firstly, I will not be talking about any games re-released for Gmod archives on Switch or PC. That's because those are very easily available, and I want to talk about some of the really weird shit. But there is one exception, which we'll get to later. Unfortunately, this means that no, I'm not going to be covering Armored Core Mobile, but we'll make do. Secondly, I'll be covering a mix of games based on existing IPs, ports, and weird original stuff. And thirdly, I can only talk about games I found to be working on this emulator I'm using. Unfortunately, that means that there is a lot of stuff I would love to talk about, but can't. All of this is to say that I actually found a game labeled as PamelaAnderson.jar, and I want to know what it is so badly. If any one of you knows, please tell me. However, I want you to know that researching even the games I did manage to get running was a giant pain in the ass, so we're just gonna roll with what the emulator gives me to work with. And lastly, I will not be using the music from any of these games unless I'm explicitly showcasing it, because, well, to be frank, it's absolutely atrocious. You'll see what I mean when I do show it off. Anyway, let's just see what the Obama phone has to offer. Devil May Cry had not just 1, but 3 games released on phones, though I could only get 2 of them to actually work. The first is Devil May Cry Deadshot. Oh my god, this game is terrible. It's essentially a top-down shooter, where you go around mindlessly killing enemies until you've collected enough orbs to find the stage boss and kill it. The gameplay loop is extremely dull, and it's only made worse by the music being some of the worst out of any of these games. The other DMC game we're talking about, meanwhile, is significantly more interesting. This is Devil May Cry Dante x Vergil, a game with a title so unfortunate it was renamed to DMC 3D internationally. This is probably one of the most ambitious games ever made for J2ME phones, as it's essentially a collection of several challenge stages based on DMC3, and honestly it's pretty shocking just how much of the main game they managed to incorporate. 3 of the 6 styles, namely Swordmaster, Gunslinger, and Royal Guard, jump and dodge cancelling, and every major enemy type is included and fully functional. Well, okay, I say functional, but by that I really mean as functional as a 3D action game could be on a phone from 2005. Everything feels really sluggish, getting anything done is a chore, and the frame rate makes using Royal Guard borderline impossible. Every time you do somehow manage to beat a stage, you can use red orbs to upgrade your weapons, and then select one of 2 stages you want to play next from the chart, which is basically the exact same thing as in Shadow the Hedgehog. Sometimes you need to meet certain conditions to unlock one, like getting a high enough mission rank at the end of the stage. I really wanted to beat this game, but for the life of me I just couldn't do it. After a certain point you reach levels where enemies can just instantly kill you, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it because the frame rate's just that terrible. But I really have to say, I respect the attempt, and from what I'm told about it, it seems to have at least been better than Peak of Combat ever was. I don't even have a joke to make here. Someone really decided that it would be a good idea to make fighting games that you can play on phones. So let's start with the most competent one. Street Fighter 2 is specifically based on Championship Edition, with the entire roster being present, and somehow it actually runs pretty reasonably. Considering that Streets is a 6-button fighter and you have a whole numpad at your disposal, I'm sure they can make something work out, right? And I mean, I guess they kind of did. You've got a punch, a kick, and a special button dedicated to a specific special. In Ryo's case, it will be the Hadouken. And yes, this means that characters like Guile can just walk forward while spamming their sonic booms. You can still do all of your other specials with the regular command inputs though. It's shockingly competent if a little bit jank. One really funny thing though, is that for whatever reason the attack sounds are extremely delayed, so oftentimes you'll finish a round only to be jump scared. Unfortunately, it's kind of impossible to tell if things like that are a emulation or a game issue, but it's funny to mention nonetheless. And I say that because there's actually another version of this game based on vanilla Street Fighter 2 that runs better, has music, and actually plays the sound effects properly. Street Fighter Alpha also got a version for phones, and tell me, does anything seem a bit awkward to you in this version? I mean, more so than you'd expect for a phone version of Street Fighter Alpha. Yeah, there's no normals. This game actually does use 6 buttons, but each is dedicated to a different special. For example, in Ryo's case, it's one for the Hadouken, one for the Shoryuken, and one for the Tatsumaki Senpukyaku. The other 3 buttons are just their super variants. I understand that to people who don't play fighting games, this is just how all of them look, but maybe, just maybe, taking away the key options that make strategizing in fighting games work wasn't the best idea. Then again, I guess neither was deciding that Street Fighter needed to be on a fucking BlackBerry to begin with, now was it? Okay, now that the dust has settled, can we agree that Neon Genesis Evangelion is an infuriatingly mediocre show? No? Can we at least agree that this fighting game, exclusively for mobile phones based on it, is complete dogshit? It's significantly more sluggish than either of the Street Fighter games ever were. It feels like the characters take 10 years before they actually do what you tell them to. And all you can do is attack or recharge your shields, which get used up as you defend. Sure, there's 7 characters and all of them have unique properties, but at the same time, some are infinitely better than others. Surprisingly enough, though, the music is not unlistenable, and the sprite work's actually pretty solid, so I would say that those are the best parts about this whole thing. Tekken Slot Battle is probably one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Not only is it ugly as sin, and has music that made me think something was wrong with the emulator, even though just this once, it wasn't, but it also turns the gameplay into a slot machine. You just select your attack strings from the wheel and watch them play out. Why would anybody ever want to play this for any reason? If there is one thing that I've noticed that's really bizarre, it's that there's quite a few ports of NES titles, and somehow each and every single one of them is absolutely dreadful. The ones I've spent the most time with are Mega Man 1 and 4, Dragon Slayer 4 aka Legacy of the Wizard, which is actually the best running one out of all of them, Castlevania 3, and Kid Dracula. And every single one of them suffers from the exact same problems. Bizarre controls, borked audio, massive input delays, and like 1/4 of the original frame rate. These are genuinely miserable versions of these games to play, and I would never recommend them to anybody over the NES originals. Probably the series with the most Java games I've seen is Mega Man. Now there are some ports, including a shockingly very competent X1 port, but there's like at least 7 original games there as well. And being a resident Mega Manist myself, I tried all of the ones I found. Rockman Gotsu no Shima Daibouken is a spin-off to the Mega Man Legends games, which I already happen to dislike. And it plays mostly like them. You go through 5 different areas with individual levels inside of them, and occasionally interact with the characters from the main games. Then you throw a tantrum about how they made the controls, which were frankly already bad, even worse. Repeat until the credits roll. Every stage is really short and super basic, and the combat is just not fun at all. It's definitely one of the most ambitious and complete games for phones at the time, and it actually feels like it could have been a full game. But unfortunately it's locked to mobile hell. Rockman GP feels like a Mega Man version of those Sonic racing games on Game Gear. It's very basic, and there are only 3 characters, being Rock himself, Roll, and Bass. Them having Bass instead of Proto Man is really weird to me, but hey, I'll take it, he's barely in anything. You just run around a really basic map using very traditional items, occasionally dodging obstacles. There's not much to it, but at least it plays decently enough, which is more than can be said for most other games in this video. Panic Fire has some very interesting sprites right off the gate, so that's something going for it. The plot is something, fireman's overheating and you need to get out of there. This is essentially just a puzzle game where you have to get Rock to the exit of each stage, but every time you move, Fireman moves as well, mirroring your movements. Every tile Fireman steps on becomes a death zone, so you need to find ways to navigate around him. It's very simple, but I know at least one person would get a kick out of it. Mega Man Pinball is probably one of the worst virtual pinball games I've ever played, and I haven't even played that many. You pick one of 3 Mega Man 2 bosses, then you just use your ball, which unlike the title screen is not Rock's dismembered head, to defeat the enemies and the bosses of each stage by repeatedly hitting them with your ball. The problem is that the physics of the ball never seem to work properly, and your panels just refuse to activate sometimes. Mega Man Tennis is actually just kind of a fun Mega Man themed tennis game. There's plenty of characters, everything works well, everyone has unique special moves, the soundtrack is good with Roll just straight up using a MIDI version of her marvelous Capcom theme, and I can't really complain much about this one. Though I will say that out of every game I've played here, the Mega Man ones are the ones with the consistently best music. At least in that regard, Capcom cared even on phones. Puzzle Battle, on the other hand, is a Mega Man themed Candy Crush. You just align 3 or more of the same colored orbs and hope that they create a chain so that you can damage your enemies. Whoever dies first loses. So I guess if competitive Candy Crush sounds fun to you, here you go. For some reason, they drew every character as a smoothed out, more detailed version of their in-game sprite, and it's resulted in Rock having these absolutely soulless eyes. That's what I look like after a 9-hour workday. Bug Sweeper is, and I can't believe I'm saying this, a Mega Man themed version of Minesweeper. Yeah, no, that's all it is. There's also 2 full-on original Mega Man Battle Network games, but I didn't play much of these as I'm not into those kinds of games. But I mean, it's cool that they exist, I guess. Okay, so I'm sure you guys know that one Italian American, right? The one who's a carpenter and also a doctor sometimes. Oh god, what was his name again? Oh right, Dr. Merio. See, Dr. Merio is a game where you play as Dr. Merio and have to kill viruses by putting 4 of the same colored pills on top of them. This is a very unique game and has never been done before or after ever again. There are, however, many more games in the Mario series, such as Super Mario. In this game, you help Mario by jumping on green bus. I mean really, they didn't even try. The modified sprites are horrendous. And Mario doesn't even grow bigger when eating a mushroom. He just turns red, which I guess makes him more like Mario. And while we're here, his sprite is from the NES game, but everything else is from All-Stars, even if slightly recolored. Super Mario is basically nothing more than a series of minuscule one-room platforming challenges with possibly some of the worst physics of all time, and the occasional enemy. Oh, and Mario 2? Literally just the same fucking game, but they added more green bus. There's also a Super Mario Free, and this one's actually different, using Super Mario Bros. All-Stars Mario Free sprites. Small issue, it runs so fast that I'd rather have diverticulitis in my colon than play this crap! There's also the alternate Super Mario Free N. Same problem, but now it's widescreen. Another category of games I found a shocking amount of is shoot-em-ups. I'm not gonna go through all of them because there's just way too many, but I'll highlight some of them. First off, there are a lot more Touhou games on here than I expected, which isn't really surprising since I think there's a million on like every system ever, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I'm not that familiar with the series since I try to abstain because frankly, I want nothing to do with the kinds of people that play these games. You know exactly who I mean. But I will say, I greatly respect the fan games. Shoutouts to Outrun Knights, 10 out of 10 Metroidvania right there. Most of the Java Touhous are shockingly competent shmups. Some of them even run better than like 90% of the games in this video, with a framerate counter just to flex that too. But there are 2 games that I really need to talk about in specific. The first is Touhou Fuyaku Hina. Unlike any other vertical shooter I've ever played, in this one you don't just fire random projectiles. Instead you have to hold down a button to charge up and fire bombs while dodging enemy fire. The other game on the other hand is Bunkacho, which is essentially the same thing, except it's just against the boss and nothing else. There's just one part here that has me a tiny bit confused though. Why the hell are the characters just modified Final Fantasy VI sprites? And there's also 3 games based on the Mushihimesama series. I actually never played any of them until making this video, but the first game here is a port that is borderline unplayable because of how poorly it runs. The second is a port of the second game that's actually very competent and runs pretty well. The third game's the big one though, because Mushihimesama Gaiden isn't even a shoot 'em up. It's instead a top-down adventure type game. You go around collecting keys to reach the exit, while you automatically lock onto enemies to attack them. You can also throw bombs manually for extra damage, but it barely does anything. I personally didn't like it very much, but it's definitely one of the better original games I've played on here. And since we're already on cave games, Deathsmiles also had a Gaiden spin-off for Java, except that this one is still a shmup. You just go around killing enemies in a small enclosed screen until you meet the conditions to beat the stage, which usually just means collecting enough of one item. There is a lot of story in this one though, so I'm sure people who care about that will at least find something to enjoy. And lastly, there's like a million Gradius and Parodius games on here, but I just got done beating the entire franchise like 1 week ago, and I'm not going back. So I'm just going to talk about the 2 original games. Gradius Neo is essentially just a 5 FPS Gradius game with some really boring bosses and the gimmick of having not just 1, but 2 upgrade lines, which I guess is supposed to make up for playing like shit. Gradius Neo Imperial, on the other hand, fundamentally shakes up the formula by making you play as one of the bosses and making you go from right to left. This is sure to impress all 5 Arabic reading Gradius players. There's really not much more to either of them, but if there's one thing that really stands out is that the sound effects are completely ear-piercing. See, because of the way that these phones process MIDI files, a lot of the sounds just end up as piano keys. This is especially noticeable in something like Sonic 2, where the piano key plays every time you try to spin dash. There is like a million Final Fantasy games on here, but since most of them are ports, we're only going to be focusing on the interesting ones, starting with Final Fantasy Block Breaker. And I'm not going to lie to you, I really thought this was going to turn out to be porn at first. But no, shockingly enough, it's just a really basic Breakout clone with extremely off-model pictures of Final Fantasy characters in the background. I don't know why, but there's just something really off-putting about the art. You couldn't really tell that these are supposed to be Rinoa or Yuna without the game telling you. Or is that just me? Am I crazy? Every other game I'm going to be talking about is Final Fantasy VII related, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me if I say that snowboarding is probably the most well-known of the minigames in that game, right? Clearly it must have had some sort of audience, because why else would Square release it as a standalone game on phones in 2008? I mean, really, what is there to say? It's more of the same shit as in the actual game with, I think, a new map, a quarter of the frame rate, and without any of the sound effects. Before Crisis is kind of huge because it's essentially a Xenosaga Pied Piper situation, but for FF7. It's a canon prequel exclusively released on old mobile phones, except that unlike Xenosaga Pied Piper, it's not exactly plot relevant, or good. This is a prequel to the main game set about 6 years prior, and focuses on the Turks. And instead of taking the smart route and making it a turn-based RPG, Square instead decided it would be a good idea to make this an action RPG with an online focus, even though everything runs like complete shit, and there's barely any sound, and of course the game looks like this. Hitting enemies with your regular attacks is nearly impossible, and it makes fights into a giant chore, so you'll just start spamming magic, but the moment you run out of MP, it's game over. Okay, so do all of you remember Dirge of Cerberus? I know I do, I wish I didn't. Some genius decided that what this game needed was a bonus episode set between two of the ones in the main game, and I cannot fathom what the fuck they were thinking with this. So while the base game is a third-person shooter, the closest thing I can compare this to is Killer 7. Bear with me here. Basically, you just walk around until you need to move the camera, at which point you just stand perfectly still for like 5 seconds so it can readjust. Then when an enemy approaches, the direction is marked on the map in this very helpful, I guess, indicator, and then to attack you first need to enter a first-person perspective, which will make Vincent automatically lock onto the nearest enemy, or rather he will try to. It's extremely unresponsive and you'll frequently end up surrounded by a bunch of enemies, which are going to take you out before you can even look at them. I know I've been very negative so far, but I'm not heartless, and there are some genuinely good games on here, as well as some genuinely good ports, so let's take a look at some of them. Puyo is a simple game, and there's not really much you can mess up with it. They ported a million of them onto phones, and each works perfectly fine, barring the occasional frame rate issues. I just don't really know why you would play these versions over any of the other handheld ones, considering that by this point plenty of other systems, including the DS and the PSP, could play these same exact games, but way better. But they work fine, and that's the important part. The same exact things can be said about Ace Attorney, but I doubt that anybody was expecting these games to not run well on phones. Outrun is probably the best running J2ME game I've ever played, period. And it's not even close. It just works. Stable frame rate, decent visual conversion, no notes. Okay, well, 2 notes. Firstly, for some reason, Last Wave is missing from the music selection, and secondly, at the start of the game, the announcer is taken from Space Harrier for some reason.
Get ready.
But I mean, other than that, this is a perfectly serviceable version of the game to play. Mr. Driller Aqua is a wholly original Mr. Driller spin-off, and I actually do quite like Mr. Driller, so this game is pretty fun to me. It's a perfectly serviceable Mr. Driller game with an aquatic theme to it all. And since it reuses sprites from Mr. Driller Drill Land, it actually looks pretty nice as well. Kingsfield Mobile is a completely storyless original Kingsfield game that's loosely based on the first few games for its visuals, but is basically an entirely standalone experience. And a very solid one too. Obviously it's nowhere near as good as the main games, especially not, say, Shadow Tower Abyss or Kingsfield 4 my beloved, but it's perfectly enjoyable nonetheless if you like this kind of dungeon crawler. Now what I find to be the most insane games on here are Ridge Racer. Both the PS1 version of the original game and Ridge Racer's PSP have versions for Java phones, and not only do they run better than half the other shit on here, they're perfectly fine as is too. Sure, they might stutter and slow down hard when you run into another car, but other than that, they are perfectly functional. It legitimately baffles me that these work as well as they do, and actually look pretty decent as well, when these phones struggle playing games that are significantly less intensive than them by every metric. And lastly, we have Ys. Now, Ys 1 getting a port is not really that surprising to me. I mean, really now, that game is on practically every system imaginable. I'm pretty sure we've gotten to the point where even a fridge or a radio could play it. It's a bit choppy, but it's Ys 1 alright. No, the one that blew me away was the port of Ys 6. This was somehow one of the first ports of the game, and yet it contains pretty much the entire thing. Like the Ys 1 port, the towns have been downscaled to just text boxes, but pretty much everything else is there. The map is almost identical, and I was able to navigate it in its entirety with just my memories of the PC version. And somehow, even the music sounds perfectly fine. Sure, this version is ugly as sin, but it runs very stably, and it plays as well as a mobile game that requires you to use a numpad to do anything could. I do find it weird that you attack by tapping movement keys, or the 1 key, but they had to make concessions somewhere, I guess. What I find stranger is that this isn't even the only version of Ys 6 for phones, nor is it the weirdest, because for some reason in 2021, the game got an MMO-style remake that was also a gacha and introduces your player character as a wholly separate person who washes up on the Canaan Islands alongside Adol. Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff and we've talked about the port stuff, but I know what you're really here for. You're here for the weird shit. And don't worry, I've got you covered. Momoko 1200 is the sole exception to my no G mode archives rule for this video, and it's not even because of the game itself, but the series it's attached to. See, this is a sequel to Momoko 120%, an arcade game by Jalico where you go around shooting these little squiddy things. I don't really know what they're supposed to be, but every time you beat a level, Momoko gets older, repeat until you die from boredom. What makes this game actually interesting to talk about is that it originally was going to be an Urusei Yatsura game, and the song that plays in every level is one of the openings to that show. What makes it funnier though is that they still did manage to keep the license for the NES version, so it still is a Urusei game on there. Anyway, long story short, this shit had 3 sequels on Java, and this is one of them. I couldn't find the other 2. In this game though, you run around the same looking level, going up and down flights of stairs while shooting these weird squid people. And after every level, Momoko grows up differently depending on your actions. Ultimately, you just have to reach the end of a stage and nothing else matters. But because everything feels like it takes 10 years to actually happen, and the shots are fired automatically, the only thing that's even remotely engaging is trying to get the platforming to work. For a game called Action DX, you'd expect a bit more, but unfortunately, it's just an endless runner. You pick one of a million characters with slightly different properties, and try to go as far right as you can without falling off the stage. You can also use this boost and some items to help you out, though it's different for every character. That's literally all there's to it. Just see how far you can go. I guess I can kinda see why this could be addicting to some people, but I didn't really jive with it. This walked so that Jetpack Joyride could run. I already know what you're thinking. Oh, a Crash Bandicoot game. It's probably going to be like the GBA. No. Does this look like the GBA games to you? Instead, this is a minigame collection. The first is pretty much like that one Mario Party minigame on the DS. I forgot what it's called. Except that here you need to try and collect Wumpa Fruit while avoiding bombs before reaching the goal. This would almost be passable if it wasn't for the music, which is definitely a choice for a 10-second loop. The second is hammer throwing, where you need to shake your phone to swing the weights. We're not doing this one. The third one has you snowboarding down a mountain on a log while collecting as much Wumpa Fruit as possible. There's not much else to it, except that for some reason the nitrous blocks push you forward like a spring, when in actuality they're supposed to kill you on touch. The fourth is a very lenient rhythm game. Unfortunately, half the inputs require you to move the phone again. For the fifth one, I swear I'm doing something wrong. You have to correctly select the right crash from one of the several silhouettes, but they just don't give you enough hints to make them out. There seems to be one more game, but I have no idea how to unlock it, so I'm just going to move on. I found not one but 2 separate apps based on the TV show 24, and yet for some reason the only one I managed to get working was a real-time clock that's just styled after the show's timer. Didn't phones back then have a clock display by default? Why would you ever need this? Well, I guess while we're here, have you guys ever seen those Japanese ads for 24 where they got Kiefer Sutherland's dub actor Rikiya Koyama to sing a song about how he's Jack Bauer and he's a whiny bitch? No, I'm serious, that's a real thing, go look it up. Rocketman GP has probably the most uncanny art out of any of these games so far. Gameplay-wise, it's kinda fun though. You essentially just go around working jobs to make money so you can buy parts to build a rocket ship. After that, you put them together and see how far your rocket can go. Simple, but definitely a solid enough time waster on a train ride. I don't even know what to say about this one. Why would you ever want the adult fish version of Seaman of all things on the go? Just so you can talk to it? As far as I can tell, there's not exactly much you can do with him at all other than that. And what the hell is going on with the background? I'm assuming the game was supposed to use the camera of your phone to show your environments, and this is just the default image of either the emulator or the game. Whatever it is, it's hard to tell, and it's very uncanny. I need this woman to stop looking at me right now. When I first saw a game labeled as Space Invaders x Pac-Man, I genuinely thought it would just be a compilation of both games, kind of like Duck Hunt x Mario Bros. I was wrong. Turns out it's actually just Pac-Man, but the ghosts are replaced with Space Invader aliens. This would be a fine enough gimmick if the game didn't freeze for half a year every time you eat a dot, making this version borderline unplayable. Have you ever wanted to do something that would scare the average foreign user to death? That's right, I'm talking about getting a job. You can simulate this by trying to help this NEET get one in a shady corporation by going through mystery dungeon floors and beating the shit out of her co-workers. I mean, this is definitely a way to climb the corporate stairs, so to speak. I'm just not sure about the whole ethics surrounding killing your co-workers. Shockingly though, this is a very competent mystery dungeon clone, and I had quite a bit of fun with it. This does remind me though that I really should finish Void Terrarium at some point. Honestly, the most standout part about this game is that 1. Damn bitch, you live like this? And secondly, escape from being a NEET is probably one of the funniest titles for a video game ever. What do you picture when you hear the words aggressive mountain climbing? Was it this? I know it wasn't for me. This is quite possibly the greatest title for a game wasted on what is essentially just helping a stick figure get by random moving objects without getting hit. It works well enough, it's somewhat enjoyable, it feels kind of like it would have been a WarioWare micro game, but it's not exactly aggressive, and I didn't see any mountain climbing either. Have you ever wanted to play the game Daifugo with Sonic characters? Okay, what about Millionaire, because that's just what it's called outside of Japan. Still no? Okay, me either, but look, I couldn't get Sonic Golf 3D to work, so this is the best we're getting. Okay, well there are a couple of our Sonic games, like ports of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, but they're so bad that they almost make the GBA port look playable in comparison, so I'm not going to waste any more time on them. There are actually quite a few Resident Evil games on here, but I only managed to get one of them working. Assault the Nightmare is, for whatever reason, a spin-off of the Ori Survivor games, which are already spin-offs, of which there's the only time I'll ever be able to talk about this. That Aim Fucking Rocks is actually one of my favorite Ori games, and I think everyone should play it. But to get back on topic, there's 3 hallways you need to go through that are filled with zombies, at which point the game turns into a snatcher type situation where you get your cursor around the screen and just shoot enemies until you can move on. Sometimes you can get new weapons or items, but they just change how fast the enemies die, since there's no actual difference in the gun's feel. This is an extraordinarily dull experience that I can't recommend to anybody. The original House of the Dead is a classic, but for whatever reason some genius at Sega decided this isn't good enough. It needs a remix for phones. The original is a rail shooter, which means that you're always moving on a fixed path and the zombies will always be in your immediate field of vision. I need to stress this because in this version for some reason they added free camera movement, with zombies being able to come in from any side around you. The only real way to tell where they are is by checking the minimap. And that makes sense considering that this game is originally intended to use motion control sensors on your phone to adjust the camera's position. But not every phone had that, and neither does the simulator. So it just lets you use buttons to control as well. Unfortunately, there's almost no way to turn fast enough with the buttons to take on everyone while still aiming like this. You basically just have to know where the zombies are coming from to begin with in order to do anything. The Castlevania 1 remake is the first Java game I've ever beaten, and I hated almost every minute of it. The level design is almost one-to-one with the original, and since Castlevania is my favorite franchise of all time, and I have a habit of replaying them all the time, I could get by with my knowledge of the original, but it feels terrible to control. The music was butchered to hell, and it's also way easier than the original. It felt like playing through Castlevania 1 if it was recreated from someone's memory of the game. There's also a secondary mode where you can swap between all of your sub-weapons on the fly and use them infinitely, but you lose access to your whip and still need to collect hearts. Never would have thought the dagger would come in this useful. And while on the topic of Konami, let's talk about a Hudson game. There's 2 Bomberman games that I would like to talk about. The first is a platformer based on the Bomberman Jetters anime rather than the games. The main gimmick is that there's a lot of verticality since you place bombs directly under yourself to function as platforms, and you can find elemental bombs to trigger switches. This could have very easily been a fun game had it been refined and not made for phones, but alas that's not the world we live in. As for the other one, I don't actually have much to say about it other than its existence baffles me. Someone at Disney really went, yeah, let's have Hudson make a version of Bomberman for phones where they reskin the enemies to be crabs, Bomberman to be Stitch, and the bombs to be pineapples? Honestly, I take everything back I just said. This is a 10 out of 10 reskin, I can't even complain. Demon Bride Alcohol Souvenirs and Me is a game that I can only assume to be a simulation of the average salaryman's home life. The only thing you can do is roll up a mountain trying to avoid any booze that comes your way and collecting as many gifts for your wife as you can. She may be the most dog-faced woman in the world, but she's still your wife, damn it. It's not very fun, but I kinda dig the arcadey feel of it, and I'm sure that somebody would get fun out of it somehow. The Great Office Escape is essentially a puzzle game where the puzzle is getting to the exit. You're a weird, sentient purple pencil thingy, and because of that, you are never allowed to touch the ground, or you will violently explode into a green paprika? This game could have been fun, but half the puzzles are a chore to solve, and way too often they rely on waiting an eternity for a chair to move into the right position. Monkey Banana is essentially just a version of those Zelda levels where you have to sneak by guards, and while they do move on a predetermined path, they only move when you do. Your goal is to guide this cute monkey to a bunch of bananas. There's not really much else to it though. Banana Operation meanwhile has you using the environment to push barrels under bananas, as that is the only way you could ever hope to grab them. No, you can't jump or go onto the crates, stop asking. Katamari-Kun is a side-scrolling endless runner version of Katamari, which is already pretty awesome. The King of Cosmos just goes, "Ah, my dumbass son, go roll shit up for an hour." And so you do. Extremely simple and nowhere near as fun as regular Katamari, especially because that music in the base games cannot be topped. But I appreciate the attempt, and it definitely would help kill some time while waiting for an appointment or something. Dragon Ball Racing is, as far as I'm aware, the only Dragon Ball Racing game ever made, which is shocking because I would have assumed that there must have been at least one other one, but no, there wasn't. This is just a really basic Mario Kart clone. Capsules are the item boxes, and there's no speed panels as far as I can tell. It's generally not very fun due to it running so poorly, and it does make me wish we had gotten a proper Dragon Ball Kart racer, but maybe we'll get one eventually. Mushi Machiuke is quite possibly the most "I'm really bored at work" tier game I've ever seen. You just move the cursor over the bugs while the needle stabs into the ground automatically. That way you can skewer them, I suppose. There's literally nothing else to it, and it goes on for about 30 seconds before it ends and you see how much of a high score you got. This is the kind of game you play only when you know your boss isn't looking, but you really want to make sure you can easily hide it when he does come around. Oh my lord, there are so many slot machines here. It feels like every other game that I would see based on an IP I recognize was a slot machine. Onimusha 3? Slots. Hokuto no Ken? Slots. Okay, well there was actually also a Naber Kenshiro game where you press the corresponding number on your keypad to attack enemies on that space of the screen, but you get the point. Eureka 7? Slots. Dynasty Warriors? Slots. Tekken 3? Slots. Kamen Rider? Fucking pachinko. I really want to know just how gambling addicted you would have to be to want to play a themed slot machine on your Nokia while commuting on your way to work. There were also several rhythm games. Beatmania, DDR, Taiko no Tatsujin, Poppin' Music, and that's just a few of them. Unfortunately, they all suffer from the same exact problems. The music either never seems to align properly with the beat maps, or the controls are completely off-puttingly matte. And if you're really unlucky, everything is so unresponsive that I'm pretty sure a plug-and-play console would have a better time reading my inputs. Pair that with the oh so wonderful frame rate we've come to know and love from these games, and I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that this does not make for a very fun rhythm game experience. All of this was merely a fraction of all of the insane shit I've sifted through, and I didn't even plan on making this video at first. But the more I looked, the more bizarre these games became, and I just had to get this out of my system. I could keep going, but we'd be here for days and my family hasn't seen me in weeks, and I'm pretty sure they're starting to get worried. You can help me support them by subscribing, and apparently if I say the words subscribe and like, it makes the icons glow up on desktop YouTube, so I guess that's silly. I also have a Ko-fi you can donate to, I guess, but with all of that said, I wish you all a wonderful morning, day, evening, or night. I'm going to destroy the Steve Jobs iPhone economy. Cheers.
Oh, this is crazy. Look at my boy playing Fortnite on his fucking Obama phone, bro. Like, he's playing Fortnite. It's like, how you even doing? What?